Welcome to Charts Today. It is Wednesday, the 12th of August, and I start by looking at gold, and it seems to be running again. We have got an upside trend here on the 60-minute chart, the short-term time horizon. We've got upside targets, and if we go to the medium-term chart, you can see here that we found pretty strong support around $4,000, and now we're just starting to cross the cloud. And if you look at the weekly chart, this is the key point here. We have found support on or around the cloud. We've got a downside target, but remember we discount downside targets in uptrends. So this target is less and less likely. We'd certainly need a new low below 3,940 to actually start looking at that target again. But the key thing is we're finding support on the cloud. And if we look at the daily chart, that's really clear there. No downside targets there. And then if we go to the 60-minute chart, we've got unactivated mixed targets, but you'd favor that upside target because we're in an uptrend. Interestingly, if you look at a very long-term chart of gold, this is a monthly chart, and I have actually made this a log chart. You can see what happened to gold in the 1970s. If we've got that inflationary pressure, that's going to be quite interesting. And one of the things you can do is you can play with the data. So I can just take a chart of gold and say, what would that look like if we had the same thing all over again? And so it's curve fitting data, if you like. And this is certainly not saying what will happen, but you can see that gold gets into the 20,000s on that same basis as previously what happened in the 70s. So this is really playing with the data. You'll also notice that we had big retracements, like the one we've just seen, where we've retraced a significant amount, but it's interesting to just play with the data in that way. So that's just a key thing. If we're seeing that inflationary pressure, gold is coming back, and we are seeing silver. Similarly, this was a really big story at the start of the year. You'll remember silver just rocketed at the end of last year, went from 50 to 120 very, very quickly. A lot of selling since then. We are still below the cloud on the daily. The long-term chart roughly finding support and a very mixed picture there. But short-term, silver not quite looking quite as bullish as gold with that upside target nearly met and resistance. But the key thing is we are seeing these metals starting to run again. This is platinum. Again, a similar picture here. The short term, just waiting to see if we break higher. And palladium, this one has also been very interesting. We are seeing just a little bit of a pullback there, but the recovery on the daily chart also underway. Copper, we've talked about having been making new highs, and that's very interesting. That's potentially inflationary pressures there, so that's going to be quite key as well. Big story is also that the US may not continue to support the Japanese yen intervention, and that will be very significant. If we look at the weekly chart on the Japanese yen, and you can go right the way back, there was a time back in the 1970s where the 350 yen to the dollar went all the way down to 75 yen, and now we're at 160 yen. That's a very significant move, and even in the last 5 years, going from 100 to 160%, that's effectively inflationary for Japan, and that's really, a 70%, 60% increase over the last 5 years in the currency decrease, dollar going up 60% against the yen. That's going to be very, very significant for the Japanese economy. And that's why we keep an eye on Japan and also those bond yields. So on the daily chart, waiting to see if we activate this upside target. Japan's the most indebted country in the world, debt to GDP ratio of 250%, the most indebted large economy. And so, a move to 3.5%, even though that's a low rate compared to the US and the UK and Europe even, it would be significant for Japan to see that increase. We're looking at bond yields in the US, waiting to see if we activate that target of 5.4%. That would take us to a new high point as well. If we look at the 10-year chart there, we can see how that trend has really changed. And if you do that as a monthly chart, we can see all we have to do is just a regression trend, if you like, and that's just a least squared regression trend, where you can just see what was a really clear downtrend is now a move, consolidation, and a move. So really significant. Just looking at those long-term charts, putting the short term into context. So taking a look at some of the other things that have been going on, we have got the NASDAQ still looking bullish on that long-term chart, of course. Medium term, we're just struggling to make new highs, and the short term there, we can see that we just need to break that 30,000 level. That's becoming a bit of a ceiling for the NASDAQ. We are seeing the futures flat this morning, the S&P future up about 1.15%, the NASDAQ up 0.3%, does suggest we'll open a little higher. We're seeing the UK future down this morning slightly, and the DAX in Germany very flat at just up 0.2%, and the same for the cash market. CAC Courant we're seeing here is flat, and Japan, despite those concerns, weaker yen is driving earnings for Japanese companies, so that's really significant as well. China, seeing the composite index there, that's the short-term chart. Looking at the medium term, we can see that we are very much range-bound. Crude oil is pushing higher. Brent Crude knocking on the door of $90 again this morning. We put our energy report out to clients earlier, and we're remaining quite bullish there. So that's going to be quite quick. And looking at the tech stocks in the US, we had Apple down 1%. They're just struggling to hold and make new highs. SpaceX is down 4%, having hit resistance at about 140. So that's really quite interesting for SpaceX investors. And really, most tech stocks were down yesterday. Meta bucking the trend up 0.7%, but really not a great looking chart. And Tesla also on the short term, just seeing a little bit of a recovery there. So that's quite key as well. But markets are relatively quiet. In August is usually the case. Selling may go away, but keep an eye on those targets, and just on the interesting, keep an eye on what's going on with that gold price. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, have a great day. Bye for now.